All right.
Welcome, kayak anglers. You are tuning into the Paddle and Fin Podcast Network, kayak fishing's best network of shows with great hosts covering all things kayak fishing, bringing you special guests covering topics such as shore fishing, river trips, gear reviews, angler profiles, tournament news, and more. Sit back, relax. Let's do this.
Chasing the 20s is proudly partnered with these great companies. Railblazer. Think outside the box. Go to railblazer.com for all your kayak and boating needs. Achigan Brand, the official brand of smallmouth bass. Go to achiganbrand.com and check out all their apparel. Ken's Jigs. Check out Ken's Jigs on Facebook or call 570-850-9153. Kayak Cushion. It's a must for them long days on the water. Go to kayakcushion.com for all your comfort needs. Nikko Baits, the next generation of soft baits. Go to nikkobaits.com and check out all their products. Little Miami Outfitters Elite Rods. Go to littlemiamioutfitters.com and check out all their cool rods. Thanks for joining us tonight, and let's get into the show.
Hey, Sean.
Hey, how's it going, Carlo?
It's going well. How you doing?
Not too bad. Not too bad.
Not too bad. Good. Welcome, everybody, to Chasing the 20 Inchers, the Susquehanna River podcast. Some exciting news going on around the Susquehanna. I don't know if everybody heard, but that huge smallmouth bass caught by Joe Raymond a few months ago was caught again by, I'm not sure who caught it, Zane Mills or Shannon Probst. They were fishing a tournament together, and they caught the same fish that was caught a few months ago by Joe Raymond. The fish, when Joe Raymond caught it, was 7 pounds. And just recently, this fish was caught, and it was 6.72 pounds. So probably not spawning anymore. What do you think, Sean?
Yeah, I don't know. It was up north, right? So maybe it hasn't even got that far yet.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I would be very curious to know, like, how far away this fish was caught from the first time it was caught.
I was wondering about that too.
You know, and we'll probably never find that information out, but that's pretty awesome. Congratulations to those two for catching it during a tournament. And Joe Raymond caught that fish during a tournament. So, I mean, could you imagine, Sean, putting a 20 that fish probably close to 24 inches, putting that on the board during a kayak tournament?
I can't even imagine. I mean,
I think like I would just like I'd be shaking so bad that something would happen. Something drastic would happen while I was measuring that fish.
That's why I don't have a picture of my 21 and a half, because I was shaking so bad. I got a picture on the board, and then I held it up like this to get my, shot with it, and it shook and I dropped it. My hands were shaking so bad. So
Yep. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit, because that's huge. That's a huge accomplishment for those anglers to catch that fish. So far, like, that's probably one of the biggest fish that smallmouth bass anyway, that I've heard that was caught on the Susquehanna River. But anyway, we're going to get into the river levels right away. The river levels as of today, we have Harrisburg sitting at 4.61 feet. And guys, the river levels are brought to you by Railblazer. Think outside the box. And then we have the Marietta sitting at 36.44 feet. The North Branch Towanda, 2.41 feet. And last but not least, the West Branch, Lewisburg, 3.65 feet. It looks like everything's on the down spiral right now. We did have, the river was up about a week ago, and I heard a lot of people talking that they were catching some big fish at that time. Because, you know, it puts them in predictable areas when the river does go up. And me and Sean were out last Saturday, right, Sean? Last Saturday. And the river was up and it was moving, but I couldn't find any fish. Sean found a couple fish behind the islands, and that's where he looked for them when the river's up. They were in predictable areas. And then yesterday we were out on the Juniana, me and Sean, and the river was moving a bit, but it wasn't super high.
No,
I wouldn't say, but
I'd say
there was some serious flow going on compared to what I'm normally, you know, used to on the Juniana. And I found some fish, and I posted a video about it earlier today. And Sean struggled a little bit yesterday and just couldn't get on a bite. But
I definitely rode the struggle bus yesterday. I might have had one bite or a nip on the Ned rig, and I tried to throw the jerk bait. I just got to get my level of comfortability with the jerk bait back. You know, I just don't have it's not a confidence bait for sure, to say the least. But
and I felt bad at the end of the day because I'm the one that decided to go up that far. I mean,
the fish were there, so
we both drove it an hour and a half, and to get skunked driving an hour and a half really sucks. I'm sorry about that, Sean, but I guess it was just my turn to start catching them.
That's right. We'll all have our days like that. So I'm not worried. I was happy to get out, and you know, I just have to work on my comfortable level. I was watching, actually, before we started, I was watching that YouTube video of your jerkbait fishing, just watching your technique, trying to see you know, how the best to do it. I tried it standing, sitting. For some reason, I just can't get a good feel on it. And so I'm going to try and mimic you next time I'm out.
Yeah. Like I said, it takes, you gotta spend, like, just take one day and only take that rod, you know, and learn the technique. And a lot of it has to do with where you cast. You can't really cast up current because it's not going to work as well, because you're trying to catch up with your line all the time.
Yeah, and I wasted a lot of time.
It's more like I want to say, like, you almost want to fish the river sideways to get that jerk bait to work right. Because when you kill it, you still want it to move, like, down current, but you don't want it to move too much where your line starts getting tight and then it's just sitting there. So it's a work in progress for you, bud. And I'm sure you're going to catch on to it. When you do, it's going to be lights out.
Yeah. Just a matter of time.
Yep. All right, guys. Today, if everybody that's watching, I know we got some people on here now, and I appreciate you guys, you know, because I know it's nice outside and it's still daylight. I appreciate everybody that's coming on right now, but we do have a giveaway. I want to show that real quick. I have Railblazer was nice enough to send us some stuff to give away. We're going to give it away at the end of the show. I have 2 rod holders with the cleat, and I also have the clear port. It's like something you can tie your boat off to, and you can also put a rod holder inside of it or whatnot, a lockdown. So I got 2 of these and 2 of these to give away at the end of the show. So just stick around to the end of the show, and we'll do a little count. What is that thing called that you have?
Random number generator.
Yeah, random number generator. What we'll do is we'll just have people comment a word or something like that, and we'll put it into the system, and then we'll announce the winner here. Or maybe we'll wait till next week and announce the winner. We'll see what happens. But anyway, Sean, if you want to introduce our guests for this week, and then we'll get on with the show.
Yeah, absolutely. So back when I was first on Paddle and Fin, I went to a fishing show, and our guest was doing a seminar there, and ended up leaving that seminar and doing a lot of YouTubing, and kind of really wanted to pick his brain a little bit about everything from those videos. And we've had Jeff Little on this podcast, and I'd say this guy, if there was going to be a rival to Jeff Little's fishing knowledge, I'd say it's this guy. So I had him on Paddle and Fin on the Noob Show back in the day, and now I wanted to have him back on Carl and I, our show, and just introduce all our new viewers to him, because he is a wealth of knowledge. So I want to welcome Juan Veruete to the Chasing the 20s podcast. Hey, Juan, how's it going, bud?
Good.
How you doing, Juan?
Can you guys hear me? I don't know how good my connection is.
No, it's going good. We can hear you.
Am I coming through okay?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right.
You're good.
Fantastic. Thanks.
So
pleasure
Juan,
to meet you, Sean. Juan.
Yeah.
Pleasure to meet you.
Juan is
Hey, it's always a pleasure
one of the
to talk to
original
anybody that
guys.
wants to talk about fishing. So.
Yeah. I guess start off just with a little bit about the history. I mean, I know you go back a ways, but I'm curious kind of where you're at now. The last time I talked to you, you had mentioned about potentially getting back into teaching, but I was curious how far away that is, or if that's still on the plan.
Yeah, I think my fishing in recent years is kind of put on hiatus due to my job, which I absolutely enjoy. But it does take a vast majority of my time. And so I got out of guiding and teaching. Really, I won't say that I was a guide. I was more of a kayak fishing instructor than I was a guide. It's a poor business model when you're trying to teach people to do things for themselves, and go out and catch fish instead of, them relying on you to catch fish. But that was my job, to kind of hopefully get folks up to speed quicker, improve their learning curves. And that was the overall goal of my classes. But recently I haven't been fishing much at all. I get very little time off work. And when I do, I usually do some backpacking or something like that. But I'm getting really close to retirement. And so when that retirement comes, you can pretty much bet that I will be teaching again. I absolutely loved teaching kayak anglers, teaching kayaking. And it was just so much fun for me to see guys go from, struggling catching fish to, being able to get out in the water and use some of the tactics and some of the strategies and start to really catch fish and improve their angling, so they make, better use of their time on the water. We all have limited time on the water, and so it's always better if we can use that time better and catch a few fish along the way. So I really missed it, and I'll definitely be getting back into it again. But I've done a lot of stuff. I've got a lot of videos out there. The videos are timeless. There's a video, you were talking about spring fishing and finding big fish. I did a seminar for Green Top down in Richmond, Virginia, a bunch of years ago. And everything that I talk about in that video is still relevant today. There's no magic to it. I talk about how to find the big fish during spring. And basically, it's almost by the numbers. And then even some presentation tactics and some of my favorite lures to use to catch those fish. So there's still stuff out there, still good content out there that I had that's most definitely relevant to this day.
Gotcha. And that's kind of where I don't know about Carlisle. That was kind of what I was hoping to maybe cover a little bit. The seminar that I first saw you do was where they go in the wintertime, and you talk about finding the deeper water closer to the wintering holes, and how they transition towards those places. And I kind of wondered, maybe if we could talk a little bit about the opposite when they're coming out of those wintering holes, and kind of the pathway they take to get to maybe, from winter to spawn maybe.
Yeah, sure. So I can definitely do that. And, a lot of this knowledge came from, you mentioned Jeff Little earlier. Jeff and I fished just a ton together, kind of early in his kayak fishing career after he got out of guiding and teaching. We fished, we did his videos. I'm on a lot of his videos, a lot of his, he did a whole year-long series. And we spent literally a year and a half fishing and doing footage for all those videos that cover like all the seasons. And we fished hard. And so when you do that and you're out there so many days, so many hours, you learn a lot about fishing if you're keeping your eyes open. So here's what I would say about, fishes that are getting ready, coming out of winter into that kind of pre-spawn mode. And now, obviously we're in April, so we're obviously kind of in that mode. What I typically did is, especially in a river like the Susquehanna River, is I start by locating what I would consider to be the better spawning areas, behind the islands, some tributaries, just those shallow gravel areas that are protected behind ledges too. I mean, those fish in the Susquehanna, they spawn behind big ledge systems. And so finding those kind of shallow, gravelly areas where you believe that there's going to be a lot, a heavy spawn area, those are probably the best. There's a reason there's a lot of fish there. It's because it's a prime area, and I will tell you that fish don't survive, and especially big fish, by doing things that aren't primed, that by doing things that aren't, the best, right? And so what I would do is find spawning areas over time. If you're fishing the river enough, you get to know where you see big, pockets of spawning fish and so forth. I'm not necessarily even interested in those fish that are moving shallow. Like that's going to be the males, right? They're going to move shallow quickly. They're going to build the nests. They're going to wait on the females to come up. The females are going to come up, and then the females are going to go back, right? So the real trick there is, I don't find any utility in targeting those big spawning females on the beds or in the spawning area. And, if you go through those areas, you'll know that it's a spawning area because you'll coast through there in the spring when it spawns on, and you're just catching all those little male bass, right? You've seen it. You're catching like 5-10 male bass, and they're biting really quick. But those are things I take note of when I'm fishing, because then I know if I'm catching a lot of male bass in that area in the spring, that's an area I want to come back to maybe next year in the pre-spawn, right? And check out some things. And so when you're looking for those bigger females, what you really have to do is start by looking at, at those spawning areas, but then you want to start to look at the structure around that area, because those fish, remember, they're moving from the wintering pools. Again, big fish do the smartest stuff. They're not going to be just hanging like where there's current all winter long, where there's a little pocket of area, where they can hold up. They're going to be in the biggest, typically they're going to be in the biggest, nicest wintering pools. And so you kind of look at those spawning areas closer to those bigger, better wintering pools. And a lot of times that's where the big females are gonna be headed. So how I find them, it's like hunting for deer, right? You find the food plot, you find where they're bedding, and then they're going to the food plot, right? And so you're going to intercept them somewhere along the way. And it's exactly the same thing with those big smallmouth basses females. What I do is I start to mentally back off and look around at the structure off of those spawning areas. What I'm looking for is major, deeper current breaks. Remember, these are rules of thumb that I'm giving you. There's no there's no absolute here. But what I mean by bigger, deeper, major current breaks is things like bridge pilings, really huge boulders, just even a drastic drop in the bottom of the river where it slopes off really fast, that provides a current break. just a rock pile. I've seen where a rock pile came off a side, kind of a side hill, in an area where there was a spawning area, and nobody even knew that was there. And I happened to find it just by poking around. You can use electronics, are great to use in the pre-spawn to find these places, because what they really are is feeding stations. Remember, those big females, they are producing eggs, and they're going to want to be where they can be out of the current but get food, and they like to be deeper, right? So I wouldn't look at like maybe a couch-sized boulder that was in 2 feet of water, right? But if I saw that couch-sized boulder on my electronics in 8 feet of water, that's money. If I see a big ledge and there's a deeper 6, 8, 10 feet of water behind that ledge, and then I also see a spawning area 100 yards away, 50 yards away, 20 yards away, that's going to be an area that I'm going to prospect for those big fish. So you really want to find those feeding stations. Again, bridge pilings are another one. What happens is those females will cycle in and out of there, because some of them will spawn more than once, right? We know that by science. And so they're gonna, it's like a revolving door. Some will move in, then they'll move up in the shallow with the males on the beds. They'll move back because they're in post spawn, but there's other females coming into that area, into that feeding station as well. And it's got to be, the best ones you can find, quite honestly. I found bridge pilings are some of the best ones, but those submerged ones that nobody sees, where you're getting like about a 6-8 foot drop off of some kind of ledge that's submerged there that you can't even see from the surface, and it's near one of those big spawning areas, that's money if you find something like that. And some guys will randomly catch a fish there, right? But they won't know that's why they're catching the fish there. Mm-hmm. They just think that fish is out in outer space. You know what I mean? Like those fish aren't in outer space at that time. You know what I mean? They're hanging on something. So those are the kind of things you want to look for. I just call them feeding stations. And again, I go into pretty great detail in my green top video, and I actually map it out. Like I actually have a chalk talk about it that shows it from different cross sections and so forth. And I go in a little bit more detail, but you're looking for feeding stations close to spawning areas, and that's where you're going to focus all of your efforts. I don't even bother going shallow, because I think that's time-wise, it's a kind of a monumental waste of time. I don't find, that I don't want to pull a female off the bed to begin with, you know what I mean? But, it is what it is. So at any rate, that's kind of how I find them. So that's locating them, okay? And it's not that difficult. It is not that difficult. Now holding position in a kayak, I do it a lot of times without using an anchor, just because I use different techniques, paddling techniques to do it that I used to teach in my classes. It just seems more efficient to me. But other times, you might be in a situation where an anchor is good. And when you find one of those feeding stations, it should have some still deep water in it. And then those fish will move to the edges, closer to the edges when they really want to feed, right? When they're kind of neutral, they're going to move into that really, really still area and just sit there. When they want to feed, they're going to kind of edge towards the edge of that current too. So you want to make sure that you're kind of realizing that too. It's kind of like the spot on the spot, right? It's like, okay, I'm going to drag my crawfish through this dead water area because I think that's, where they're at, but they actually might be on the edge of that. And it could be either side, or they could be in behind, just waiting on food to come up over top if it's one of those submerged ones. So that's how you find them. And like I said, it's not rocket science. Fish are not smart. They got teeny tiny brains. I can remember one time I found one of those submerged places. I caught 3 20-inchers off of that one spot. I think wow. Tony Heredia was with me at that day, and I can't remember. I think the biggest one was like 21 inches. But when you find them, you can. I actually stopped fishing. I was just like, hey, you can have my little spot here. I found to my buddy. I was like, I'm done, man. 3, and that's the river god smiled on me, and I'm not gonna get greedy. I'm not gonna get greedy. And it was. Really
I've fished with Tony before, so I'm sure he was thankful to hop in there too.
Yeah. So Yeah.
Let me tell you something. I catch one 20-incher, and that I'm not going to be greedy at all.
I was like, it happened so fast. I was like, there's got to be one more in here. And then there was one more. And then I was like, there's got to be another one. And there was. And then after that, I just shook my head and I was done. I was just like, I'm out of here. Like this is not.
That's an awesome day.
It's too much. There's other guys who have done that. So it's not an unattainable goal. It's not an unattainable goal. So, now how do you catch them? Like, I think you were talking about jerk baits and again, in that video, the green top video, I go into some detail on the baits, but it just depends on the mood of the fish. Think about top, middle, bottom, right? And probably in the spring, you're not going to get much of a top water bite. You know what I mean? So you're probably talking more middle of the water column to bottom. And then it's like, okay, how fast does that bait need to be moving to get any attention, right? Sometimes the slower the bait, the better, because they're just not in that mood, right? One of the things that, some of my staples during that time of year are jerk baits. And so I use a lot of jerk baits, and actually I pulled one out, and right here's one of my favorite ones. It's a Lucky Craft Aurora
That's
perch.
juicy.
Yeah. And so that's one of my favorite ones. And then another really good one, and I rarely talk about like color and stuff like that, but a lot of times and I talk about in that seminar about different colors for different scenarios, different color water. Here's another one. I like this one no matter, it's like what I call green water to brown water, right? So it works kind of in that murky water scenarios, but it also works in clear water. This is Dirty Water Devil. It's made by a Pennsylvania guy who makes lures in Pennsylvania, and it's one of my go-tos. It's an awesome color. But I'll actually take these. This is one of my favorite springtime baits for pre-spawn. This crankbait right here, and I'll tell you why in a couple minutes. And what I do is, you can see here, this is a shallow run. It runs like 4 to 6 feet, and then I have another the same color that'll run like 8 to 10 feet. That's really important because you want this thing to be hitting bottom, right? And so, to trigger those strikes in the spring in particular. And so I think it's important, guys, to realize that you really have to, get down to the fish. Like I said, it's middle and bottom usually this time of year. So you want to be in that middle of the water column at worst, probably on the bottom most of the time. So I'll use 2 different size bills, but the same color. And that way I can even have a lot of times, because like Juniata, you guys were talking about fishing the Juniata in the spring. When you're looking for pre-spawn big females, you're gonna hit shallow water, you're gonna hit deep water. That's a shallower river, right, on average, even then more shallow than the Susquehanna. And so I find that having 2 different crankbaits saves me from having to retie, or even just did you ever run a crankbait that's shallow running? You get to a deeper spot and you're just running it. You're not hitting bottom, but you're too lazy to tie something else on.
That may have happened to me once or twice.
That happened yesterday.
And honestly, this time of year, you're probably missing fish. You're probably missing catches. So it's worth it to tie on another crankbait. One little trick too that you can do with these crankbaits, if I find myself missing bottom a little bit with the shallow runner and I'm not hitting bottom, I'm not really feeling it grinding bottom, I'll actually dip my rod deeper into the water, straight down, and just dip it down until I catch bottom again. Sometimes it's just a matter of you just hit a deeper spot, right? And then you start grinding hard. You just lift your rod tip again slowly and just keep working the bait. So with the crankbaits, you definitely want to keep them. You want to keep them on bottom. With the jerk baits, that's more of a middle of the water column, but it's still good for those neutral fish because it's hanging there. It's just hanging there, and now I could get into a lot of different nuances here, but let me talk about one more bait. Maybe two more baits. Definitely a spinnerbait in the spring, and you're probably not going to be running it in the middle hard, right? Now, if I can, I'm going to fish it fast in the middle, but probably in the spring, you're going to be slow rolling it, bouncing bottom. That configuration I use is probably pretty heavy. It's going to be about a half an ounce minimum. And that's kind of my sweet spot for the Susquehanna and the Juniata, about a half an ounce black. Again, we're probably fishing mostly green water to dingy water this time of year, probably not fishing a lot of clear water. So I do have some chartreuse I use in clear water, I have literally two different color spinner baits. That's all I use. I
Now,
know it sounds ridiculous.
are you
remember-
using willow blade or Colorado blade?
It in the summer and in clear water, I tend to use a willow and a Colorado combo, and I use a 1/2 ounce spinner bait with the chartreuse and white skirt on it, and then spring almost exclusively I use a black spinner bait with black skirt with a big Colorado, as big as I think I can get away with, big black
slow rolling.
Colorado.
Yeah.
And I'm slow rolling. Yep.
So you're
and
just
I'm
getting
just getting that thump.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other trick there, I'm gonna clue you into something I talk about my classes too. Fish are predator, right? They're predators. Yep. They look for something different, right? They notice things that are different. That's how predators work. So when a lion hunts on the Serengeti in Africa, it notices the one springbuck or whatever the heck they're eating out there. It notices the one thing. My Wild Kingdom days when I was a kid watching Wild Kingdom, the one when you're watching the film, you don't even see what the difference is, but that lion notices there's one that's just not moving as fast. It's got a little bit of something going on with its leg, and that's the one it goes after because it notices differences, right? When we as humans walk, right, we're predators too. We walk. If you're walking in the evening and you see a tiny flash of light in the wood through the woods, it draws your attention immediately. You look at it, right? It draws your attention. The fish are no different. One of the things that I do in dirty water, because a lot of times you're going to have some sun penetration, some light penetration. I'll have some strands of chartreuse worked into my black spinner bait. So I don't want it all black. I want that little bit of a something else. Even in my soft jerk baits soft paddle tails that I use, I'll literally put a chartreuse dot on the chin, the bottom, so that when it rolls, it makes almost like a flash. And I'll actually, instead of making the whole tail chartreuse, I'll just make the back of it chartreuse so that when it flips, it's like a light, it flashes on and off. Now, these are things that I do that I can't tell you 100% that these things are the things that work. And I'm not one of those placebo people. I'm like the last person that would believe in some placebo, but I have fished next to guys so many times. Whenever I help them do those things, they start catching fish. To me, that's it, right? We got to experiment here. The guys, and this with that swim bait trick, that soft swim bait trick, I've fished next to guys, not catching fish. I'm catching more fish. And we do that little trick because I bring markers with me. And we mark it up and boom, all of a sudden that guy's catching fish. So I've also, one of the things that I've come to some of these little things by teaching classes, because I'm watching what's going on with my students too when they're out there fishing. I'm looking at the differences in what they're doing and the lures they're throwing and things like that. And so sometimes we catch little things that are interesting. But at any rate, chartreuse strands do that. Another biggie in this time of year is crawfish, because crawfish start to move around a lot. So soft crayfish, fished on bottom, different sizes. I have different sizes, like two different sizes, smaller, more finessey one, a little bit bigger one. And that's usually if I got to drag something on bottom. You could drag a tube. Again, It's about being on bottom, right? It's not, it's not necessarily about, the actual label on the lure bag or whatever it is. It's about being in the right place. And so how fast I move that crayfish depends on the mood of the fish. Sometimes I move it 5 inches and let it sit, 5 more inches, let it sit. You got to be real patient sometimes. That's how I caught those 320s. It was like right in behind the structure, right down the back of it. And then I just let it sit when it hit, and I moved it a little bit, let it sit. And if I dragged it too far off the back of it, I was done. I wasn't going to catch a fish. They were pressed right up in it. So again, noticing those things I think are really important when you're fishing. Like when you're fishing structure, it's not, you think about like how close to that structure you're getting the fish, how close to those current breaks are you catching those fish, because that's a real good cue when you move to the next feeding station that you've located in that area. So those are some of the lures and some of the things about those lures. With your jerk baits, give you some hints there. You can cast at an angle upstream, like almost like a swing, right? And what I typically do is if I want it to hit something, like say I got a submerged piece of structure, and I could see like a flat area where where the current, is not moving behind a ledge or something like that. And that's where I want that thing to end up. I'll cast up and past it and kind of swing it. But at the same time, I might take 3 hard cranks to get it down, right? First, because I want to get it down the middle water column. And then I'll let it drip. I'll let it swing into that current. Like it's kind of like you got to finesse it a little bit, right? You're casting the right distance away and kind of like judging it. Crank it down 3 cranks, and then let it swing, and you'll swing right across. You might be even with that current break or that still water, and then jerk it a couple times into that spot, and then it's in there, right? You're in there, you're deep then, and then you do it again, and you let it set. So that's one way you can get the jerk baits down. I find with folks when they're fishing a jerk bait, they're even not being patient enough. They're not actually putting that bait where those fish are, where they think it is, and that just takes a little bit of practice. And you guys also, I heard you talking about speed too. All my crankbait fishing is from upstream to downstream. Think about a fish sitting there in any situation that you're fishing a crankbait or even a spinner bait. I try to present upstream to downstream in every scenario, unless I can't position my kayak in the right way to get that kind of presentation. Then I might do something else. I might swing it into where I think the fish is or something like that downstream. The idea behind that is, if you've ever seen fish in clear water and you've casted behind the fish and brought the bait up through, a lot of times you're gonna scare that fish, right? And I think that when you're putting it in front of its face, it's coming at it, so it's like less menacing, I think. The other thing is you're actually like triggering the fish too, because you're putting something right in front of it, and it's got to decide, am I going to eat this thing that's coming by my head, or at least take a crack at it, or am I just going to let it go? And you're taking advantage of that predatory nature of that fish. And so that's some of the things I talked about in my classes, just taking advantage of that predatory nature, because those fish are not smart. They're not smart at all. They're just made to poop and eat and lay eggs, and that's about it.
That's funny you say about casting upstream, because I mean the majority of my fish yesterday on the Juniana were I was casting kind of like on a 45-degree angle or so, but
swinging it. Yep. You can
swinging it. Yep. And then, but there was one fish, and it was the biggest fish of the day for me, was when I was actually, the current was ripping so hard yesterday that it was really hard to stay in one spot. So we started getting into some real shallow water right at the beginning of this island, and I casted downstream, and I made like 3 jerks, and boom, 17-incher. And I don't know if I must have just casted right on top of his head. That's what I'm thinking, because 9 times out of 10 you're not fishing a jerkbait downstream. But that was cool. And also we started
it's tough to
Go ahead.
I was going to say, one thing you can do as a river angler too. Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah. There's just a little delay but it's good.
Okay. Okay. So one thing you can do as a river angler, all of my rods are high speed. Now, all my reels are high speed, and that gives you a bit of an advantage when you're doing the stuff I'm saying, fishing from upstream to downstream as much as you can. Now, a lot of reels label themselves as high speed. Find the inches that it brings in per handle crank. That'll tell you if it's high speed or not. You got to be over 20 inches per handle crank to be in the high speed area. And a lot of folks will say, well, I don't have enough power then. I don't know how much power it takes to reel in. I've reeled in plenty of big fish over 5 pounds, and I've never had any trouble reeling in with a high speed reel. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, there's some mechanical advantage. I'm not going to lie, right? That's physics. But as far as the fish goes, there's no great mechanical advantage in having a slow reel compared, as opposed to a fast reel. It just doesn't make a difference. Now, some people will fish a slow reel to slow themselves down. But the cool thing is when you are slow rolling a spinner bait and you're using a super high speed reel that's doing like over 20 inches per handle crank, you get worn out a lot less in a day. You can make a lot more casts, and you just train yourself to just crank slower. You know what I mean? All my reels are high speed. I just train myself. It's leisurely, and you're really when you're slow rolling, it's really leisurely. Then, you're just kind of creeping along. So high speed reels, I'm a huge fan. Everything I got is high speed.
Got it. Well, Carla, why don't we do our 30-second break? We'll come back and cover a little bit more.
All right, sounds good.
Hang tight, guys, and we'll be right back.
All right, guys. Well, welcome back to Chasing the 20 Inchers, Susquehanna River podcast.
We are speaking with Juan Veruete about pre-spawn, like springtime tactics, and just got done talking about jerk baits. That was going to be one of my big questions when you first started talking about where you were finding them, is how the heck you fish that with a jerk bait. But that makes a lot of sense, that you cast up by it, crank it down. Now I was thinking about cranking it down. Are you going to run into that obstruction, or you just want to crank it down enough to kind of glaze over top of it and then jerk once you're by it to get down into that area?
Yeah, I like to, let's say it's a rock. I actually, like a big boulder, even a chunk of ledge rock there, I like to cast up and on the other side of it from where I'm at, and then crank it down, and then just behind it, I try to hit the back corner of it, you know what I mean? And then just bring it in from there. Obviously, it's a timing thing, it's a current thing, and then I'm usually swinging them, right? You don't necessarily, cast the upstream unless I'm in a really, you could do this, like if you were in, say, bridge piling, you could pull up in behind like the tail end of the bridge piling current where it's not breaking the current as much, and you could cast right up to, say, the left of the bridge piling, and then crank it real hard into that soft water so you can get some bite with your bill, and then you get it down. So you could do it that way, but that's definitely harder. I use a swinging technique mostly up, swing down to where I want to be when I'm using jerk baits. Or, as you said, you can swing downstream from you too. That's what fly fishermen do with their streamers. They swing downstream. So they locate what they want downstream, their target downstream, cast to it, and then swing into it. So.
And do you usually hit those areas with not a moving bait or like a crankbait or a jerk bait first, and then if you're sure there or think there's a fish there, you'll come back with like the crawl, like you were saying, and work it a little slower?
Yeah, it depends on the day. Honestly, like what I do is if it's been really cold and it's been raining, and the water chills up a lot, then I'm going to probably slow down first. Okay. And then I'm going to speed up. But I will probably do both. I'll probably try to drag something and throw a crankbait through there. Like the crankbait is my spring kind of bread and butter, and the spinner bait, and then the crawfish bait or tube or whatever it is. So I might do both. I typically fish both because you got time. When you're fishing areas like that, you're so focused on the feeding stations, and you might only have 3 or 4 or 5 of them in one area, right? That you're moving around to. And so you want to really, make sure you're trying a couple different lures, but the crankbait's a good search bait, and you can move that super slow across the bottom. So, I might do both. I don't know.
Yeah,
Sometimes I just guess. I just guess and move from there. Yeah.
I threw a crankbait yesterday, bunch. I just maybe wasn't throwing in the right spots, but I would not get a bite on the crankbait. As soon as I started throwing the jerkbait again, I'd get bite.
Yeah. Yep. There you go. Well, that's again the move of the fish, right? The jerkbait is more stationary, right? It's
Yeah,
hovering,
yeah,
and so again, it goes back to speed. How fast do they want that bait moving? And on that
yeah.
day, what you're saying to me is, they really
They
didn't want
wanted it
anything to move.
slower.
They
Yeah.
Yeah,
they, they want it
I threw a
slower. They
chatterbait
were
almost all day and didn't get anything. So
yeah
yeah. So
yeah.
we kind
So
of should have put the puzzle together, Sean,
yeah
by a little bit more communication of what we were doing, because I mean,
yeah
we weren't communicating very well as far as what we were throwing. So maybe, we probably could have put the puzzle together if we would have communicated a little better and realized that they wanted something a little slower.
yep. That's funny you say that. In my classes when I was teaching, if I had 3 or 4 guys in a class, which was pretty typical, 3 or 4, what I would do is I would do a lot of talking in the morning, like go through some strategies and so forth, and I would have them basically, I would give them a box of lures that I had this kind of like pattern development system, and I would give them a box that would help them do that. And what I would do is I would bring them together after 30 minutes of fishing. I would let them fish for 30 minutes. You had 3 or 4 guys fishing for 30 minutes on the Susquehanna. I would bring them in, and honestly, most of the time somebody caught something, and we compared notes. Where did you catch the fish? Well, how deep was the water? How fast was the current moving? What lure were you using? How fast were you moving it? Was it in the top, middle, or bottom of the water column when the fish hit it? Those are really important things to be asking yourself. And when you have buddies, just getting together, helps refine it. And what I would do in my classes, a lot of times, we'd fish for a while. We would gather some data, basically some data. We would compare notes. I would go through the questions, because I'm hoping that they're also learning. Like, these are the questions you have to ask yourself. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not asking this question just because I'm
100%.
asking the
Yeah.
questions. Like, these are the questions you have to ask yourself when you're on the water, because really you're just a data collection person on the water, really, to be honest with you. If you're really approaching it right, like you're systematic. You can go by gut, but it's better to go by variables and what's happening, in the data. But at any rate, you do that 2-3 times during the day, and everybody's catching fish. You know what I mean? Like it just,
That's a good
and,
idea.
and again, my goal wasn't to catch fish in that class, because I sometimes we're catching fish and I'll move on to something else because I need to teach them something else, right? Because it's like, yeah, that's great, the fish are doing, we figured it out, we know how to pattern these fish today, but I need to teach you some things that are going to work a different day. You know what I mean? When the fish are like we might be catching fish on jerk baits, and I might say, hey, let's learn how to throw a crankbait and how to use it at different parts of water column, how to use it in different speeds, those kind of things. But comparing notes as an angler, if you're fishing with buddies, is really important. Example of patterning, where one day I was fishing on the Juniata with 3 guys in my class, and they were not catching fish for about the first hour, and I'd caught fish like crazy in the area the day before with some another class, and they weren't catching fish, and they were actually doing the same thing that the guys the day before did unbeknownst to them. And we were fishing a lot of big ledge systems that were submerged, and fishing the still water behind them. And what they were doing is they were dragging crayfish baits, right? And when they were reeling them in, I noticed that one of them got a little excited because a fish swiped at it, right? And so then it happened again. And then, I saw some fish following that they didn't see. And so when I saw that, we were fishing in about 8 feet of water. What are the variables there that you see? And so I brought them aside and said, what's going on? Like, when are those fish attacking your crayfish baits when you're dragging them on bottom? No. Where? Oh, in the middle of the water column. How deep were we fishing? Oh, like 7, 8 feet of water. Okay. How fast was the bait moving? I was just reeling it in. So like moderate speed, middle of the road speed. And I said it was consistent too. Like they were attacking when it's consistent. What we ended up doing, remember I just told you to hit bottom with your crankbaits?
Yeah.
We took a shallow runner and fished it in 8 foot of water. So it was right in the middle of the water column. And basically like it just basically slow rolled it in the middle of the water column. And we started catching fish. I mean, literally on the first cast that one of the guys had that tied on, they started catching fish and we caught fish like the rest of the day doing that. It was nuts. So again, it goes back to like observations, right? Hope that makes sense.
Yeah. So
Definitely.
like we all know that, like, you know, you could be catching them like that for a couple hours and then all of a sudden the bite shuts off, right? So then you just got to reset and like in that situation, like you reset basically and start going through your lures again to see what they're doing. You know, is that something that you do in your arsenal, Juan?
You know, if I'm catching fish and I'm catching fish really good and the bite stops, I stop catching fish. I start questioning what I'm doing if I'm still doing the same thing. Does that make sense? Maybe there was a variable in there that I didn't understand that was really going on. And I start to review like, okay, I was catching fish and I was doing this. I was fishing this deep. I was fishing in this structure. You know, and so I go through that first before I go nuts and just start weeding through lures and stuff like that. I start thinking about whether or not like what I really thought I was doing was what I was doing. Does it make sense? You know, and I have seen that. I have seen that where I'll give you an example on the Juniata River again. I was fishing with actually a buddy of mine. Dave Gallagher. He just caught a 20-incher. He went through my class years ago.
We know Dave too.
When he first started kayak fishing, he went through my class and he's done really well. I mean, he's I think he qualified for the Bass Masters the 1 year too. So at any rate, you know, we were fishing and we did okay earlier in the day, and the bite did change. Like we couldn't figure out why, and what had happened is a variable shifted, something shifted, and what happened was this. You know, and this is where observation comes in. We were doing really good. I mean, I think I caught a muskie. I lost my rod that day on a muskie. I went to pull, like set the hook, and my rod fell out of my hand when I set the hook on it, and I actually found it and caught it again. So,
You got
I found
your
my
rod
rod
back?
laying in the bottom. Yeah, I found my rod laying on the bottom of the river. Yep, I had a torpedo on, and I was going upstream in like about 3 foot of water, and I saw the handle of the rod. I just like shut down my motor, jumped out, like reached on, you know, went under the water, grabbed that thing, and the muskie was still on there. It was nuts.
Nice.
But we were struggling with the smallmouth, and what happened was, you know, again, observation. They were deeper. The fish we were catching were kind of deep. It was in the spring, and there was a hatch happening, and it was a stonefly hatch. And what had happened was, so it's like, okay, there's a stonefly hatch. Let me put on a popper and let me try really shallow. You know what I mean? Because maybe the fish shifted over there. We weren't seeing them rising or anything like that, but that's exactly what happened. And we started catching fish in super shallow water, like just everywhere. You know what I mean? Like there was actually no location pattern to it. I mean, all it was is get, you know, wherever the bugs were going to be hatching, that's where the fish moved into. So they kind of like all the fish kind of, this is the weirdest thing. All the fish kind of shifted to focusing on that. And we caught a bunch of fish on poppers and some really, really nice fish too. Really nice smallmouth too. That was on the Juniata. So
Jason Ortiz here says, good afternoon. Just got back from Steelton and he caught a 20.5, 4.39 pounds. It was awesome. Hey, congratulations, wow. Jason. That's an awesome fish.
He's in the club now. He's over 4 pounds and over 20. Nice.
Yes, sir.
Very nice.
Yeah. So, yesterday, me and Sean made a trip up to the Juniana, and when we launched our kayaks, we went upriver and we got into, what was it, about 6 to 7 foot, Sean,
Yeah.
water depth,
Mhm.
and we were fishing up there a little bit in that depth range, and nothing special. We were just, casting out to the middle and working our jerk baits, and I think Sean was fishing a chatterbait back, and I think I caught like 3 or 4 in the deep water. Well, then we started drifting downstream, and we started getting into some really, really shallow water. Like, I'm talking like it had to be anywhere from 12 to 6 inches deep at some areas. And we weren't, I think I might have seen one fish the whole time we were in that shallow water, because the water was it was pretty clear, Sean, wouldn't you say, for springtime?
Down there, yeah, down in the
Yeah.
shower once you got maybe 5 feet, I think it was
Yeah.
about 5 feet visibility, I'd say.
Yeah. So I stopped throwing the jerk bait because the water was so shallow. I didn't, it's no reason to throw a jerk bait in 6 inches of water, right? I picked up a glide bait, and I actually seen a fish. It came up and it ate, I guess it was a stonefly or something like that. It ate off, it was a topwater strike. And I seen it and I was like, oh man, it was just like right by my glide bait too that I was throwing. And and then I told Sean, I said, you know what? Maybe we made a mistake. Maybe we should have stayed in that deeper water. And he's like, yeah, maybe we should have. So we wound up motoring back up the river, back to where we were, and we went back up there and caught one. I caught another one, but it was just it looked like a perfect, when we were in the shallow water, it looked like a perfect spot for a spawning area. But there was no fish there, and I don't know if the current was just a little too hard there in that area, that wasn't really a spawning area. But it seemed to me like yesterday the fish were in the deeper water. That's what it seemed.
I don't think they're ready to spawn yet. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a good observation. The other part I would say to that is, so you put that in your memory bank, right? Like the other thing is, you asked me like if the fish shut off, right? Well, one thing I do is I check to make sure that what I'm really doing is what I'm doing. The other thing I do is, if you're in a different type of, if you're in a river where it changes a lot, where you might be in a different part of that river that the fish are going to relate differently to the structure just because you're in a different type of section of that river. And so you might have a different pattern you have to fish there. And I've had that where the pattern flips back and forth, right? The pattern's a certain pattern in the deeper areas. And then in the shallower areas, you're fishing a different type of pattern, right? So it might be like shallow water. What I would do is I'd look for differences in color across the water, and that usually means differences in depth, right? And you might, in that case, it's shallow, throw a popper, throw a suspending jerk bait, but throw it not out in outer space in that shallow water. Throw it to those specific deep pits, right? I mean, you see it, you go through this area, everything looks like it's, 2 feet deep, but there are some deeper pockets, you know what I mean?
Yep.
And so maybe that's what you got to do in those areas. Look for those little bit deeper pockets, look for a boulder out in space or something like that. You know what I mean? So the pattern might change because just the structure of the river changes for a certain section, and so you might have, and I have done that where I'm fishing 2 different patterns in a day, depending on the structure of the river and the depth kind of changes the pattern. Makes sense?
Yeah,
That makes a lot
definitely
of
makes sense. You see a lot of the really good kayak fishermen that are out there, the ones that post videos on YouTube and stuff like that, where they have like 3 or 4 rods sitting right in front of them with their baits dangling off the front of the kayaks, just for that reason.
Well, and the Susquehanna is made for that kind of thing. Like you'll go from the deep pockets and the deep stretches to the shallow stretches and flip flop back and forth. So you have to have some idea of what to do.
You almost have to have, like, if it's, let's say that the bite that day is a chatterbait, you almost have to have a 3/8 and a 1/2 ounce tied on for that day, depending on what kind of water you're covering for that day.
Yeah, I'll take usually 8 to 10 rods when I go, and I use, the thing it does too. Like you asked about, like, what do you start with? I might throw 3 or 4 different baits at the same type of structure, right? And that helps me cycle through baits faster. One great bait a lot of guys overlook. It's a great pattern finder. It's a good search bait. Is a soft swim bait. You can fish a soft swim bait on top of the water. You can fish it in the middle, and you can fish it on the bottom if you rig it right. And so you can fish a swim bait in all different areas of the water column. And that's one of my favorite baits to set a pattern with. Especially in the summer. Especially in the summer, it's really good. It's a really, really good search bait. Had a lot of luck with that. But yeah, your pattern can change depending on the section of river you're in, you might fish. In the Susquehanna is a great example of that. There's might be a section that has a lot of weed islanders, right? So those fish in that section with a lot of weed islands, they're going to relate to something, right, differently. And then I get to a section that's ledge. I have to implement a different pattern there, right?
Yeah.
If it's all ledge rock, so I'm fishing a completely different pattern, and that's useful in knowing when to switch gears, right? Because you might say, my swim bait was working great up in the weed beds and stuff like that. Well, that's a different pattern, right? And maybe a different more than fishing in the ledge system, or maybe a spinnerbait would be better, or a crankbait would be better for those fish, just because the way they're positioned on the structure, because of the bait that they're after, or the mood that they're in. Does it make sense?
Oh,
So
absolutely.
being able to identify the patterns for the certain area of the river that you're in at the time is really important too.
Yeah. For me, it's always a argument with my brain myself, is like, I'm going through the baits and I'm throwing it at the same structure or whatnot, and I'm always thinking like, well, maybe there's not a fish there, or is there a fish there and I'm still throwing the wrong stuff? Like, you go through that argument with yourself in your brain all the time.
And that's where it helps to have a buddy too. You know what I mean? But again, my starting point is usually driven by the watercolor, the depth, the flow, and the temperature of the water. That's usually, I use that to help me get a starting point with what bait I want to try that day. Hope that makes sense.
Absolutely.
Because if it's clear and low, I'm probably not going to slow roll a ½ ounce, 3/4 ounce black spinner bait. You know what I mean? I might, but probably not. And so I let the water conditions, the flow, the clarity of the water really drive my presentation, because first and foremost, the fish has to be able to find the bait to hit the bait, right? And the other thing I say to myself too, let's face it, the Juliana River and the Susquehanna River, they're awesome rivers. Usually where you think there's going to be fish, there probably is fish there. You just have to figure out how to catch them.
Yesterday, for me, the Juniana is like, it's not as target rich as the Susquehanna. Like, you go out on the Susquehanna and there's targets everywhere. The Juniana, to me, it's like there's a lot of targets that are underwater that you can't see. So, why don't we go through that real quick? Like, say you're on the river, you're on the Juniana River, and you don't see many targets out there, obviously.
Because all your targets are below the surface. All your targets are below the surface.
So where do you, for the viewers out there and the listeners that are listening, where do you start in a situation like that? Same, like middle, bottom, same thing.
Well, the fish are probably going to preference a certain depth. And here's one thing I've seen in the Juniata River, especially in the wintertime. This is going to be hilarious. You'll have a bank coming down, right? That's a pretty steep drop down to like maybe 6, 8, 10 feet of water, right? So it's coming down like it, and it's dropping pretty quick. If there's a boulder on the side of that thing, there might be 5 or 6 fish lined up behind that boulder, because the Juniata is just a small river with not, in that section, there might not be a good wintering pool, right? Or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so in the Juniata in particular, there are places where there's structure, there's ledge rock, there's boulders, there's chunk rock where you can visually see it under the water, or you can see it on the surface. But there's a lot of river. What I look for there is, the drops from the bank into the channel of the river. You're always going to get this effect, right? Sometimes it's very shallow, right? But what I'm looking for in the Juniata a lot of times is this effect coming off the bank. If I get a drop, it might be shallow for a while, and then it drops 2, 3, 4 foot, and then it comes right back up. That drop is where those fish are going to line up, and there's going to be chunk rock and boulder there, and that's ideal for crankbait fishing. Because you can run that crankbait down that contour of that bank, and that's why a lot of my fishing in Juniata is done by crankbait, because I can bring it down those slopes where you're looking at the water and you don't see a bunch of ledge rock, you don't see grass islands, you don't see a cluster of boulders, right? But you get these changes in depths. There are many areas in that river, where you got some deeper water, and you're just looking around saying, where should I start? And I'll also visually look to see if there's boulders under, like on that drop. And obviously that's where I'm going to focus my efforts, because those fish are going to line up on that drop, nose up into that boulder that's sitting on the side of that drop, and you catch a ton of fish. And if they're not active enough to hit a crankbait, you throw a crayfish and bring it down off of there.
Yeah.
But that's one of my big things on the Juniata fishing. Fishing changes in depths. Does it make sense? Fishing and they can be very. That's why when you said, "Oh, there's shallow water," right? Well, I'm going to look for a different color water that signals some deeper water, even though, because it's relative, right? Because 3 foot is better than a foot to some fish, right? so it's relative, right? You don't get those like massive, like 10-foot divots, where in the Susquehanna, like you get the big changes, right? Stuff that drops from like 4 foot to 10 foot, whatever, So yeah, a river like that, it's important. You do have some, weed growth there at times in some areas. So you can use figure out a pattern for the weed areas, grass islands. A lot of times, the fish in there's really shallow grass islands there, and obviously a kayak is a very stealthy thing, and so using something you can make a long cast in the summer, and get way out there, like a big heavy jerk bait of some type, like a soft plastic jerk bait, big popper or something like that. You can chuck it a country mile. Would be good around those weeds in the summer.
Awake bait. Awake bait.
Wake bait.
What do you think, Sean?
Yeah.
Wake bait.
Yeah.
That's an underutilized bait. Back in the day before wake baits were even around, there was a bait called I have some of them. They're hard to come by. Head made it. It's called a meadow mouse. Mouse. They brought them back for a while. I don't know if they still. There was a short period of time when they brought them back, but I haven't seen them since. And I have a few of them in my box, and that was like the precursor of a wake bait. You could lift your rod tip. It was basically a mouse with a leather tail, but it had a metal lip on it. It would run like 3 foot deep, but if you kept your rod tip really high, it would stay just below the surface and had this big body and would just move water. We catch so many big smallmouth on that thing. But now they make wake bait. So
it looks like they're only on eBay anymore. So
I'm going to start buying them up.
Yesterday, I didn't notice a lot of rocks on the shore, Sean. Did you? I noticed a lot of mud. There was a lot of steep mud banks. And I think that's why we were throwing towards the middle of the river a lot, because we didn't see the stuff we wanted to see on the banks.
And we did stop and fish one ledge system that was obvious pretty heavily, but neither of us had any. That's where the one bite I had on a Ned rig, like the one even bump on my lure that I felt where I was.
Mud is tough. I mean, they'll move through there, but mud is really tough. If you're just fishing all mud, no rock. What I would do if I'm in an area with mud, I'd probably try to get out of it as fast as I can.
Yeah.
to a different area. Or
That's probably what we
if
should've
there's some
done.
deeper water, if there's some deeper water, you can also, this is where like you're learning to feel what's on the bottom is important.
Yeah.
And I use a lot, my soft plastics, a lot of them I use exposed lead so that I can feel what's on the bottom better. So I can feel it grinding rock as opposed to slogging through mud. But that's where I would probably get out like a crankbait and start looking around and see if I can find a pile of rocks or something like that. You know what I mean? Because you can tell the difference with a crankbait if you're, that thing's digging mud or if it's hitting rock. And I think that's what I would do if I was faced with some rock and I knew I wanted to fish it anyway, just to get something out of it. I would start looking for deeper water around that mud where I don't see mud and hope that there's some rock there. And a lot of times there is.
It's funny that you say that because most of the banks that we were we didn't even fish the banks really. We just seen that they were like mud and it was a really good slope on the banks. So we figured we were in deeper water. And I was live scoping, and I live scope a lot of rocks out in the middle of the river. I seen a lot of structure out in the middle of the river, big rocks and stuff. And believe it or not, actually, the one fish that I did catch, I see there was a big rock out. I could see it on my live scope, and then my rod just loaded up like as soon as I seen that rock. So
yeah, that's where I would move my boat into the muddy water, the shallow muddy water, or into the mud, and then fish out into the middle of the river into the rock. You know what I mean? Like as anglers, we tend to want to stay in the middle and fish the bank.
Yeah,
it
was opposite.
I want to fish. Yeah, I want to fish where the fish are.
Yeah.
So sometimes I'm gonna like, I'll fish the bank. I honestly, like, I can't say whether I throw to the bank or I throw to the middle, because in a river I just throw to where I think the fish are, and in that case I would move my boat to the less desirable water and then fish out in the middle, hoping to catch some rock. Because my guess is there's probably a bunch of this fish will be out in that rock out there sitting.
Yeah, and that's what we did. We kind of stayed on the banks and fished. Well, we were still in our kayaks, but we stayed on the outside of the middle of the river and fished the middle. Yeah, and that's where they seemed to be. Like they weren't up shallow, they weren't up on the banks. Not where we were anyway.
They're still thinking about coming shallow. They're kind of early in their thought process, I guess.
Yeah, we had it was a fun day until the wind started kicking up. But
yeah, I think the key is like, there's no magic to deciding where and when kind of thing, but you do have to take those cues.
Yeah. All right. Well, you got anything else for Juan, Sean? Any more questions, or does any of the guests that are watching have any questions that they want to put in the comments section for Juan while we have him on here before we do our Railblazer giveaway?
Juan, I just wanted to say thanks again. And man, if you ever teach another class, I know at least one person who will be there for sure, because that sounds amazing.
You got two. And also, Juan, me and Sean and I are fishing a team tournament this year on the Susquehanna. And this conversation we had together really helped, because not only for us, but for the people that are listening, communication is key, especially on, what we talked about in this podcast.
Oh yeah, definitely. The first tournament, kayak fishing tournament I was in, was on the North Branch of the Susquehanna, and we actually, my buddy and I that fished it, we were on the Wilderness Systems team at the time, and so that was kind of nice. And he ended up getting second place, and I ended up getting first place. We just fed off of each other's information basically to try to nail it. And we had a really great pattern that was a big fish pattern. And I know we were coming into the launch where you were taken out and they're giving away the prizes, and we were throwing back fish, and the guys were like, "You won, didn't you?" Because they were like, "We're throwing back fish that were competitive, I guess," because the way it is, the measurings had already started. But that was a good day. That was a good day. I'd say too, like as far as kayak fishing history, I was around before there was fishing kayaks. I mean, I used, my first fishing kayak was a Ride 135. That was not, it wasn't a fishing kayak. It was just a Ride 135, and it was the old style one too, before they redesigned it and made it a lot nicer. And then the rest, you made all your gear back then too. You made your crates, you made your rod holders, you made anything you needed. You pretty much made it.
They didn't have any companies.
Early.
There wasn't many companies back then.
No, the first company that I pro staffed for was Yak Attack. And then shortly after that, Wilderness Systems. They were awesome to me. I was with them for probably it was over 10 years. It was an awesome company.
That's awesome.
We did a lot. A lot of design. I helped with the design of the Attack series kayaks. Paddled the prototypes of it and gave the designers feedback. It was they did a good job of hearing what we were saying about that boat. That's probably one of my favorite boats.
Nice. All right. Well, Juan, we appreciate you coming on. We appreciate all the juice that you laid down today, the special information.
I did throw a link in the chat early on with a link to that seminar that Juan was talking about too. So definitely, guys, if you're at all curious, go on and check that out. I linked to the first part of the seminar, but I'm sure when you find the first one, you'll be able to find the second one pretty easily. So be sure and go and check that out. Yeah. I can attest to Juan's seminars. They are super informative. So please, guys, go check that out on YouTube. The links in the chat.
Yeah, and if you ever get that started again, like Sean said, we know 2 people that'll be into it, and I'm sure there's a lot more people out there that would want to sign up for it.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I've been teaching for a long time, and I designed a lot of the classes. Well, I designed all my classes that I taught, and I used a lot of stuff. I got to give credit to Jeff Little. He gave me some of his base curriculum that he used when he was teaching, and I just took that because of my teaching background and so forth, and just kind of built on it. And then I actually ballooned out into other classes that were spin-offs that help guys like get more advanced, in the sport. So it's been a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to getting back to it. And thanks, guys, for having me today. It was a ton of fun. I feel like I might have to go kayak fishing next week. Get out there in Susquehanna. So,
is there anything you wanted to shout out, Juan, or anything at all?
I just want to shout out to some of the early guys that were kayak fishing, like Jeff Little and obviously Chad Hoover. I knew him when he first really started to have that. What was it called? Kayak bass fishing, the website. I was on River Smallies back then. I don't know if that's even around anymore. That's how I got the idea to go kayak fishing, because guys like Jeff Little were on there and some of the other guys. I don't know that Jeff was on there at the time I was on there, but I fished with a lot of great anglers, and I think you pay attention to people. I fished with some of the best guides on the Susquehanna, and just being around them, fishing with them, and always be open to learning things. If you're an angler listening to this, you always have something to learn. I learned from my clients sometimes. They did things that worked, and I was like, "Cool, what are you doing?" And so I tried to learn from people too. So I think as an angler, we always have to be learning. We have to be observant. I think that's my number one tip: be observant and be observant key. Like a scientist. Be observant like a scientist. Like take in the facts of the situation. Don't worry about the theories. I always hate it when I see like on some of those pro bass tournament things, like, well, the moss was growing on the other side of the tree, and and then the spring gale blew up, and I just knew it was going to be a bite on the blah 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 blah, right? Like, I'm just like, oh Lord, it ain't that hard,
It was just yesterday. It was like the first bite that I got. I was like trying to give information to Sean, and I'm like, shit, I don't remember exactly what the heck I was doing. So once the second bite, I was like, okay, I paused it, and he bit it. Yeah. So then I, passed a little bit of information to Sean, but it was just like you get caught up in the moment so much. You're like, oh my God, what the heck was I doing just then when I got bit?
Well, it was like the week before I texted you, they're in front of the islands, and I meant on the bottom downriver side, and
you gave me false information.
Carlisle was throwing above the islands,
in front of the islands the whole time,
and I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry."
Having those little conversations is really helpful too. between your angler buddies. Because again, thinking back to when Jeff and I spent a year and a half, and we also had a couple other Susquehanna guides in there, they were boat guides doing the video with us too. And just the trading of information in terms of observations, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Not,
it's
you know,
huge.
well, I think that this and I think that, right? Like the observations were what was the most powerful in trying to learn things that were really useful for angling. And I think that time, you know, that you know, Jeff and I spent together doing that series of videos was just, I mean, we picked it apart all year long, like winter, spring, fall. We had it down to a science. I mean, it was like, it
That's
was awesome. So
That is awesome.
yeah, it was awesome. All right, fellas. Well,
All right.
gotta
Thanks for coming on,
I gotta
Juan.
do
We
some work.
appreciate you.
Yeah, sorry to keep you
The
a little.
OG.
No, this was awesome. If you guys want to talk about anything else down the road, you got a specific
Definitely.
topic, I'm more than happy to jump on anytime you guys need somebody. So have a good
Definitely.
year fishing. Keep those big fish pictures coming. All right.
Yes, sir.
Will do.
Hopefully you get out
Thanks.
soon, Juan. Thanks for coming on. We
I
appreciate
will.
you.
You guys
Thanks.
have motivated me. I think I got a little bit of time on Saturday. I got to call Dave Gallagher up and see what he's doing. Maybe we'll head down to Susquehanna for a day. I'll try not to do any work on Saturday next week. So
There you go. Our
All right,
work is
man.
done. Have a good night,
all right,
bud.
awesome.
All righty.
What do you think, Juan?
I think I wish Juan was still teaching. So,
Yeah.
but maybe we'll have to see. Maybe if there's a business for that, maybe, you know, once we get get a good idea of what's going on, we should get into that, because it sounds like there's a market for that.
And it's always good. I mean, what's better than teaching people how to catch fish?
Oh, heck yeah,
You know,
dude.
I think my life would be stress-free if I had that job.
Juan could probably tell you some stories that would change that attitude, but yeah.
Well,
So-
you want to do this giveaway, or how are we going to do this, Sean?
So I think what we should do is, anybody who's still watching, throw your name in the chat and we'll assign a number to you. And then we have a random number generator. We'll just set it to the number of viewers that we have, or the number of people in the chat. And then we'll spin the wheel and let it pick the winner. So
Yeah, we'll do that. And then whoever wins, just send me your information on Facebook Messenger, and I will get you the products right away. So we'll give that a little bit of time. Looks like we have still about 12 people on here.
All right. So
put your names in
Roger will be number 1. Scotty will be number 2.
Yeah. Well, we'll give it a little bit yet and try to see if we can get some people on here to what we're giving away is 2 Railblaza rod holders and 2 of the, I think they're called the clear cleats. They're like it's like a starboard kind of cleat that you can put on your boat or whatnot.
Richard will be number 3.
Come on, guys. We need more than 3. This is what we got. Look. We got rod holder, and then we got the clear port here. We're going to give away 2 each.
I'll have to check out that clear port. What you said, it's like a cleat that you can tie off on?
You can just tie off on, and then you can also use it as like whatever has that star.
Oh, it's a base. Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like a cleat and a base. Okay.
Yeah. So you can put camera mount. You could put rod holder. Basically anything that has that star on it in Railblaza. What I like to use, and guys, I have 2 of these on my boat. I got the camera mount from Railblaza. I have 2 of them on the back of my boat, and they have that star. You see that star right there?
Yep, that's their
that'll fit in anything. That's their main. What do you call it, Sean?
Their attachment point.
Yeah, their attachment point.
So Caleb, I have as number 4.
All right.
So we'll give it maybe another minute here. I wanted to, I just updated my camera. I got a DJI camera to replace the GoPro Fusion that I had before. So hopefully I'll be able to contribute a little bit to the YouTube channel here shortly. I liked my 360, but it just the post editing was just such a pain. It just was not intuitive or easy, and like my old computer would take. I'd basically render that video overnight because it took that long to render. Like a 3-minute video took overnight on my old computer. So I'm kind of excited to get out there on the water with the new camera. And
Yeah, you'll like that thing, Sean.
yeah, I was playing around with it tonight before we came on, and I'm excited. So,
and for you guys that didn't see, I did post the video from yesterday's fishing trip, just some of the catches. And we're getting close to hitting 500 subscribers. So we're at 450 right now. And I'd like to see us hit 500 before summertime. So if you guys can help us out with that. And, we're only 50 away. So.
Alrighty. So I think we have right now 4 people. So I set our magic wheel to 4. And are you ready to give it a spin here? All right. So let me hop back over here. We'll give it a spin, and we'll see who picked here. And
number 1.
So that's
Roger. Hepner.
Wait, no,
that was Roger.
Yes, Roger was number 1. Yep. So
Roger, you're the winner.
So Roger, make sure you either reach out to Carlisle, or you can message us through however you want to get a hold of us.
Yeah, just try to get a hold of us and give us your mailing address, and we'll get this sent out to you. You got 2 rod holders with the mounts, and also the 2 clear ports that you could also use for either tying down your boat or your kayak, and mounting a camera mount or a rod holder or whatever on there. So congratulations to Roger.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys again for tuning in. And anything else, Carlisle, you want to
add? No, just what an awesome guest we had on.
I told you
I
learned
I learned some stuff today. I can't.
Yeah, when we were trying to figure out who to go on, I was like, oh, I got the perfect guy. So
yeah, it was awesome.
Alrighty, guys. Well, we will close it out then for this week. Thanks for everyone who hung out with us the whole time. It's going on close to an hour and a half, and you guys are super troopers for hanging in there with us. So we'll be back in 2 weeks with another awesome guest. But until then, get out there on the water, be safe, and enjoy yourself. All right.
Thanks, guys. See you next time.
All right. Oh, I lost the outro. Where is it? There it is.
Thank you for tuning in to the Paddle and Fin Podcast Network. We hope you enjoyed the show. Don't forget, for future shows, like, follow, share, and hit that subscribe button. Make sure you check out our individual channels and accounts too. Want to be a guest on one of our shows and talk of adventures, gear, or products? Contact us. Thank you for watching The Noob Show with Matt Gibson, Chasing the Tide with Dustin Nichols, The Rusty Hook with John Rapp, The River Run with Adam Fraser Pross, May Contain Fishing with Daniel Woodcock, Chasing the 20s with Carlisle Esterly and Sean Lavery, Friday Night Bites with Brian Schiller. Thanks for tuning into the Paddle and Fin Network. Subscribe and always wear your PFD.